Welcome to Social Learning. In this studio, we are focusing on the relationship between spatial configuration and social organization in schools. We are using space syntax theory to understand this relationship between spatial organization and social phenomena. Using this method, we can quantify and visualize how some spaces within a layout are more likely to bring people together, while others will be less frequented and private. This helps us understand how certain layouts facilitate spontaneous encounters or interactions between varied groups of people, while others create stricter boundaries between groups. We have looked at two aspects of spatial organization: access relationships and visual relationships. Access relationships consider the permeability afforded between convex space units, while visual relationships consider the permeability afforded between eye-serviced fields. We have used the measures of integration and choice to study permeability. Integration is the closeness of each space to every other space in the system. Socially, integration can be said to indicate to movement. Spaces with high integration tend to be the destinations for gathering and bring people together. The spaces with low integration afford more privacy. Choice is the betweenness of a space, or how likely a space is to be passed through on all shortest routes from all spaces to all other spaces in the entire system. Socially, choice can be said to indicate through movement. Spaces with higher choice values tend to be the on-the-way points where chance encounters happen due to the large number of people crossing paths with each other. The following plan of a house was analyzed using the depth map software using 4 measures. The integration value shows that the largest living room, which is colored red, is the most integrated space. This is where all the family members come together. The dark blue spaces are the least integrated and also the most private. The choice values show that the central corridor and large living room have the highest choice, since they fall on their way to maximum other spaces. These can be considered to be spaces where chance encounters are likely to happen. Step depth follows the shortest path from the selected root convex space to all other convex spaces within the system. In the house plan, the entrance corridor shown in red has been chosen as a root convex space. The spaces with the highest step depth from that space are in blue. Total depth is defined as the sum of the topological depth from any node to all the others. As seen in the plan, the dark blue spaces are the deepest spaces in the house and can be considered to be more private.
Topological space types. The 4 topological space types are A, B, C and D type. A type spaces are dead ends and cannot be passed through, so have no through movement. B type spaces allow through movement but only the same way back. C type spaces offer one alternative way back, and D type spaces offer more than one alternative way back. By adding new spaces to a space type in the same relations and maintaining planarity, the emergent spatial configurations are called structure types. A-type spaces form star structures, B-type spaces form path or sequence structures, C-type spaces form cycle, and D-type spaces form wheel structures. A star structure is formed when a central space branches out into different dead-end spaces. A star structure has high integration, high local choice and low traversability. It has zero directional movement. A path is formed when a series of spaces are laid out one after the other and terminate on one end. A path structure has low integration, low local choice and low traversability. It offers one directional movement. A cycle is formed when spaces are laid out one after the other, with the last space connected to the first, forming a loop. A cycle structure has low integration, low local choice and high traversability. It offers two-directional movement. A wheel is formed when spaces are arranged in a star format with the spaces on the branches connected to each other, forming multiple loops. A wheel structure has high integration, high local choice and high traversability. It offers multi-directional movement. Non-correspondence and correspondence relationship. Grouping can be classified into two broad categories, transspatial and spatial organization. In a correspondence model, the transspatial and spatial grouping are kept separate, while in a non-correspondence model, the spatial and transspatial grouping are mixed. The diagram shows the two models. In the correspondence model, the two types, let's say children and adults, are separated into two different spaces. While in the non-correspondence model, the spatial boundaries are overcome and the transspatial groups of adults and children are mixed.
The visible and accessible points from a singular point subjective to the angle of vision is called an isovist from that point. Isovists can be quantified by two broad categories, local and global measures. Local measures are the measures that are determined by the local characteristics of space and are not subject to change with respect to the entire system. Compactness is the ratio of the area of a shape to that of the area of a circle, both with the same perimeter. The value of compactness ranges from 0 to 1. Occlusivity, an edge that is unbounded by a surface but is the resultant of the visible field being blocked at some point, with the emergent edge being called the occlusive edge. Global measures are the ones that need to be looked for the entire system and cannot be looked at in isolation. Visibility looks at how one point is seen from a sample set of points. This measure can be of two types, directed and non-directed. Control can be defined as the smaller areas having views over larger areas. This is an important tool to understand the dominance of a point with respect to others. Mean visual depth is the number of visual steps or turns one needs to take from one point to see other points. The angular depth to a point in plan is the lowest angular change in heading along that path. The mean angular depth at any point is the average of all lowest angular depths from the set point to all locations in the plan. Lesser deviation means the higher mean angular depth.
Apollo Schools, located in Amsterdam and designed by Herman Hertzberg. It follows the Montessori pedagogy, which actually has no curriculum. The classrooms are grouped and are opened up to the large central space, which is actually the heart of the building. The classrooms are actually the dead-end spaces, as you can see it in the justified graph. So there are two aims of the architect. One, to remove the threshold between the classrooms and the corridors, and other, to have a transparency across all the levels and different spaces. So he tried to achieve it by making a wider corridors and design the floors in such a way that you can have visual contact to other spaces of other levels. From the integration map, you can see that the center space and the corridor space are more integrated.
Using the isovist software, the compactness was analyzed. The compactness value increases while going from the common hall space to the spaces and shared spaces between the two classes to the classroom spaces. This suggested that the motive to the design, the classroom which are more focused than the informal reading spaces present in the hall. The point isovist from the central common space on the ground floor offers much more visibility towards the classroom spaces than that of the other two floors. That is, the classrooms on the first floor and the second floor offers much privacy.
The Montessori School Delft in the Netherlands was designed by Herman Hertzberger in 1966. It follows a Montessori-type pedagogy with no fixed subjects or curriculum, but focuses on practical and peer learning. He has designed each classroom in the form of independent houses which lie along a central hallway. The classrooms are L-shaped and have a small level difference which allows the formation of secluded spaces like rooms in a house where different activities can take place simultaneously without disturbing each other. The smaller space at the lower level, being a dead-end space and the least integrated space in the classroom, is used for creative and messy work, while the other part is used for work requiring more concentration. Every classroom has a private dead-end space as well as a more integrated space, which forms the circulation loops, as seen in the justified graph. The isovist analysis of the school was done focusing on two factors, control and occlusivity. The control was found to be higher in the central hallways, the entrance of every classroom, as well as the internal connections between the classrooms, since they have a high visual dominance over the other spaces and into the restricted visual fields. Therefore, the classes tend to be controlled from these points. The occlusivity was found to be higher at the entrance as well as over few of the students' desks. This implies that there was a high chance of new things entering the visual field from this point. A drastic drop is seen in the lowered level of the classroom where the occlusivity becomes minimum, thereby allowing secluded and private work.
St. Bridget's Monastery, built by Geoffrey Bawa in 1962, is located in Sri Lanka. It was built to provide a safe learning environment secluded from the surroundings by a rigid peripheral boundary within which interior and exterior will be highly integrated within each other. The monastery has an open plan with all the walls at a height of 1.2 meters, segregating the entire megastructure of a pitch roof into smaller enclosures used as classroom, activity corners, and niches which are under the staircases with ample built-in storage. These classroom spaces have high connectivity value by being connected with different spaces on all the four edges. These factors result into the multiple transition spaces connecting to a single garden, making it the most integrated space out of all the spaces. Majority of the spaces of the school are D-type, including the classroom and veranda activity spaces, while the washrooms are the only dead-end spaces. The comparison of the isovist at an eye level of a child with that of an adult suggests the visual control of teacher over the entire place and thus on the children itself. The compactness and occlusivity values of the corners of the classroom reassures the fact that these corners can very well function as four independent learning spaces within one classroom.
The Every Love by the Meds in London embraces the idea of open education. This is brought in by blurring the boundaries between the classrooms and the corridors. Children between the ages 4 to 7 study together, wherein their classrooms are interconnected and make loops with an alternative path. This gives children more opportunities for peer learning, wherein the learning happens both in classrooms and otherwise. It also gives teachers autonomy to choose who, what, and how to teach. To counter this, classrooms have been given breakout spaces for formalized individual learning. The idea of outdoor learning is given equal importance by having designed courtyards that connect various points on a plan to make a shorter path. The very young children have a separate entry from the outside that dilutes its connection to the rest of the school. For the older children that are 7 to 9 years old, which have more formalized learning, are segregated by having washroom block in between, in which the washroom corridor and the main corridor overlap. Because of the L-shaped nature of the plan, in which the senior students are kept at one end of it, they have very high vista length into the outdoor spaces and are immediately disconnected from the other students. The main corridor has very high control, which makes it a powerful connector between the classrooms and re-establishes the original idea of the school.
The primary school at Nagel was designed by Ado van Eyck in 1956. The school is designed as a hall-type school. Its spatial configuration is centrifugal and takes inspiration from its patron village's layout. Although not centered around a specific pedagogy, the planning of the school accentuates connections of polarities, inside and outside, through the in-between spaces. Each classroom opens up to another one, thus indicating towards a non-correspondence model. The corridors are the most integrated spaces in the school, which reflects upon the emphasis that the architect put on creating important in-between spaces. Each classroom, despite being on one or two loops and just two steps away from the most integrated space, has relatively low and homogeneous value of integration. This can be attributed to the wardrobe space, which acts as a buffer between the classroom and the corridor. The justified graph from the entrance illustrates that 70% of spaces lie on loops, mainly comprising of classrooms and connectors. This shows the presence of a lot of interconnectivity and choice of movement for inhabitants. The dead-end spaces, 24%, are functional spaces such as toilets, kitchen, and resource rooms. From the entrance, the classrooms are the deepest spaces, thus adding layers of spaces between visitor and inhabitants. The graph on the right accounts for the route that may be taken by the principal in order to carry out surveillance of the school activities. While there isn't much accessibility, a large amount of space is visible from this path. When looking at the control graph, it can be observed that a lot of points of control lie in the corridor closest to that path. Apart from that, the junctions between the two connected classrooms have high control values as well, which gives teachers ability to survey multiple spaces at a time. Although this may be detrimental to students from a privacy point of view.
The most distinguishable feature about RC High School is the presence of two accessible corridors on both sides of each classroom and 2 points of access provided to each. This, along with 7 entrances to the building and 5 staircases, extends the idea of facilitating encounter and avoidance between its students as well as its teachers. The services and the staircases located in the corners are places with the least integration values, while the central hall and the corridors on the ground floor are in turn places with the most integration values. The integration across classrooms spans over a comparatively average value, which is in contrast to most schools where classrooms share the least integration values. This tells that the classrooms were considered as more than areas of mere focused learning and sometimes also as potential connectors across 2 corridors. All the classrooms, activity rooms, auditoriums, and even most of the services are C-type or D-type spaces except for the one classroom present on the first floor. This tells about the nature of the classrooms to provide more engagement with peers and lesser constraints to concentrated learning. The common areas like the central hall and the corridors have higher values of control, possibly because these are the peer learning spaces where maximum interaction among students of different age groups is bound to happen. Higher values of control thus ensure a greater surveillance. The classrooms have relatively lower values of control, which allows the teacher to have a greater autonomy in these spaces.
The Mall School is located in Germany, built in 1972, designed by Hans Scharoun. A key feature of the school are the diverse individually shaped elements strung together like houses in a village and linked by street-like interior corridors. Each classroom has its own indoor and outdoor study spaces. The integration graph shows that the most integrated space in the school is the central walkway, which is the space used by the younger children of different grades to gather and interact. The white passages that connected to the senior classrooms have a high integration value, and these were the spaces used by the senior students during the break time and between classes. On looking at the justified graph, we can see that all the classrooms denoted by the square shape are type C spaces, that is, they lie on a loop. Yet the classrooms are also connected to a few dead-end spaces, thus giving the students of a particular class a reasonable amount of privacy. The large number of type C and type D spaces was key to the architect's idea, as having various entrances and exits from one space to another allows for all sorts of interaction within the campus. The isovist analysis focuses on the paths directly connecting to the classrooms that have a lower choice value as compared to the main walkway. This is crucial as it gives the students a little privacy and separation from the common area.
The open-air school in Clearstrat is a part of series of open-air schools, most of which were situated in the countryside and were intended for sick children. The architect believed that the physical training of children is as important as the intellectual. Jan organized the classroom in such a way that they received abundant natural light and sun. In return, the terrace shared by the classrooms of the upper floor, which is also used as a classroom, is accessible as many months a year, in good or bad weather, since it is covered and protected from the wind. The school consists of a square classroom blocks in 4 levels placed diagonally on the site. This basic square is subdivided into 4 quadrants around a diagonal central staircase. East and west quadrants each contain 1 classroom per story, shared by an open-air classroom on the south side, which is the balcony. The central staircase connects all the 3 floors, and it also happens to be the most integrated space of them all. The staircase leads upwards as well as to the basement. It is the most integrated space also because both the entrances from the back and from the front sum up to the common meeting point, which is the staircase again.
St. Xavier's Primary School is located in Ahmedabad, built in the year 1967, designed by architect Hasmukh C. Patel. The main aim of the architect was to blur the boundaries between work and play. This has been done by providing a courtyard for a cluster of 3 classrooms. Here, corridors become alternate classrooms as they are of the same size as that of the classrooms, and courtyards become corridors. This multifunctionality of spaces builds a flexible learning environment for the students. The integration graph shows that the corridors and the courtyards are highly integrated as they serve as the shortest route to multiple spaces as well as are spaces for maximum interaction. While the classrooms are segregated, hinting at disciplined learning along with play. The justified graph from the entrance shows that the classroom form the dead end, that is the A-type spaces, while the corridors and courtyards are on multiple loops, that are either C-type or D-type spaces. Using the iService software, the compactness of the school was analyzed. The courtyards and corridors are the least compact, while the classrooms have high compactness. This means that the classrooms are spaces for focused learning where the teachers can supervise the students and the students themselves are not easily distracted. The courtyards and corridors are places for informal interaction and activities. They can be surveyed easily due to their low compactness, as evident from the path iService drawn along the principal's route from his office and back.
The modern school in Vasant Vihar, Delhi was built in 1974, designed by Jasbir Sachdev and Rosemary Eggleston. The school was made in phases with a series of interconnected blocks connected via courtyards to ensure independent functioning of each part. The classrooms are placed in close proximity to each other within a block with a vision that they can be used as subject rooms in future. A peculiar feature about the school is how the classrooms are intentionally placed away from the main corridors and courtyards, which are the most integrated spaces, because the architect believed that the classrooms were meant for focused learning and thus wanted to cut down on noise penetration, thus making them the least integrated and dead-end spaces, as you can see in the justified graph. The corridors and courtyards, on the other hand, are on multiple loops since they serve as connectors between the different wings. The idea of having one comprehensive system rather than 4 distinct blocks with courtyards for the most part of bridging the gap between the corridors or the block provides more control to the iService. However, the courtyards, which for most of the part serve as a different convex space of its own. This turns into the courtyards having less control because only visible areas that are one step deeper would be that of the corridors, which do not have a largely different iService. The corridors being narrow and having only limited access to the inside of the classrooms, study areas and libraries, the next visual step provides a relatively different iService of the inside of the classroom.
TU Primary School by Alliance Architecture, Norway. Design and pedagogy. The star-shaped plan allows a configuration for assigning different functions to each wing, making it highly segregated. Learning spaces in the academic block are divided grade-wise, with each having individual entrances, services, and breakout rooms, making it correspondence model between different age groups. Classrooms are on a loop with the corridor and breakout rooms, resulting in a more evenly integrated space, which would seem as one whole learning area. The staff rooms are situated in the center of the academic block and far away from the admin block, making it non-correspondence model. Justified graph. All classrooms are on a loop spaces, which means C-type. Nearly 50% of the spaces are dead-end type, even though the school layout has multiple entries leading to a bigger loops. On a loop and on a multiple loop types comprises of spaces like corridors and other transition spaces. Iso-West analysis. Occlusivity. The value of occlusivity is higher in corridors and lower in classrooms, making it a more focused and less distracted learning area. Also, the highest value of occlusivity would be that of the central space on ground floor due to its random and deep iso-west cast into all wings because of a star-shaped orientation. Accessible and visible iso-west. Accessible and visible iso-west from the corridor in academic block shows the amount of vision to the outside due to the windows running all along the room's exterior side. Angular depth. The value of angular depth from central space on the ground floor is the highest in principal and admin office as compared to any other room on the floor. This shows the privacy level of the administration and its hierarchy of command in school.
The School of Alpha Omega is located in Indonesia. It was designed by Raw Architecture in the year 2017. The school has been designed for 300 students from kindergarten to grade 12. The 4 blocks in 2 floors arranged in a radiating pattern allows enough openness to nature. The school has been designed corresponding to the natural environment in order to give children a sense of closeness to nature, thus invoking outdoor learning experience. The classrooms have been divided on the basis of grades, with younger children occupying the ground floor classrooms. The school follows weak framing so that the students have some level of control over what they learn. This is the integration map with connections. The corridors, being the connector of all the other spaces, are thus highly integrated. These are the spaces for maximum encounters and interaction between the users of the building. The corridors have niches for seating, and these are the spaces for peer learning. The first floor corridors wrap around the classrooms, and its openness allows the class activities to extend more towards these natural settings. On the other hand, the classrooms have low integration value when compared to the corridors. The justified graph shows that the classrooms are segregated spaces. All the classrooms are dead-end spaces with only one access point from the corridor. This reduces distractions due to movement within the classrooms. These are the spaces designated for concentrated learning. All the corridors are in multiple loops, and this maximizes several movement possibilities within the build form. Compactness of the school has been studied through the iso-west software. The classrooms, being highly compact spaces, allows each person to see one another, thereby engaging the students in a more collaborative learning experience. This would in turn allow the teachers to facilitate the students with ease. The long corridors are the least compact spaces.
Crow Island School was designed in 1940 by Finnish architect Elil Saarinen. The school is located in Illinois and consists of a pre-primary, primary and intermediate school. The school's pedagogy is focused on experiential, child-centric learning that encourages spontaneity, initiation, creative and collaborative work, and independent thinking. The classrooms are L-shaped and built to function as autonomous units. Each class has its own teaching room, secluded workspace, outdoor courtyard, and washroom. The classroom is also quite disconnected from the other classrooms. The central axis contains the principal's office and the common activities like the art room for candle making and spinning wool, the library, and the playroom. These functions, though centrally located, are quite disconnected from the classrooms. The deliberate separation of the principal's office gives the teachers a high degree of autonomy. According to the ISOVIST analysis, the mean visual depth of the school is highest in the pre-primary block, as well as the workshop spaces of the classroom. The visual depth in the central spaces, like the lobby and auditorium, however, is comparatively lower, showing that the space is quite decentralized. If we look at the compactness, we can see that the classrooms, the playroom, and the primary terrace are highly compact, whereas the corridors have a much lower value. It can also be seen that there are varying degrees of compactness within the classroom itself, created due to its shape.
Initially built as a girls' school with 561 students in Copenhagen, the Alexander von Humboldt Gymnasium School underwent subsequent changes in its names and survived through the NSDAP era, hosted Olympic swimmers, and served as a military hospital during the war. The new building was built in 1928 in Bauhaus style by architect Max Todt, and the school functioned as a gymnasium school, meaning it was primarily to prepare pupils for higher education in universities. Along with a series of extremely integrated classrooms along the corridors on each floor, the school also has a double-volume auditorium, a gymnasium, a playing court, open-air classrooms, and dedicated spaces for art, music, and STEM subjects, all of which have a very controlled accessibility. In other words, the entire school is designed such that there is a clear segregation between visitors and inhabitants, and the single access provided to almost all spaces helps to make it a strong correspondence model. The classrooms are subject specific, which is a shift from the earlier model of assigning classrooms to different grades and also helps in intermixing of students from different grades. Since the entire school is just a collection of these branched off spaces from the corridors, the school in many ways tries to have a more interactive relationship between seniors and juniors through prep rooms, where an older kid can mentor a younger kid, open air classrooms, and special classrooms on the ground floor. Using the ISOVIST software, the angular depth and the occlusivity of the school was analyzed. All the classrooms have an average angular depth, suggesting that the classrooms are not exactly a visually central space but also have some kind of visual connection with the attached corridors, making it a more focused area for study. ISOVIST from the students' desks and classrooms have a lower occlusivity value, and one can infer that essentially the idea of learning in the school is of a more focused and serious approach, where they ensure that the students are not exposed to outside distractions.
The Hunstanton School is located in Norfolk in the UK. It was designed by Alison and Peter Smithson and was completed in 1954. The school was designed on the principles of formal legibility, compactness, and economic circulation. The classrooms, all of which are located on the first floor, are connected to the ground floor via 10 staircases. This eliminates the need for noisy corridors, which could be a source of distraction for the students and teachers. The plan shows the linkages of the convex spaces and their integration values. The corridor near the entrance, the central hall, and the external play areas are the most integrated spaces, while the classrooms on the upper floor are the least integrated. This means that the classrooms are highly focused spaces, and the teachers also have a high degree of autonomy over their class. Interactions among students of different grades would occur mostly on the ground floor and external spaces. As seen from the justified graph from the entrance, a large percent of the spaces are D-type, lying on multiple loops. None of the classrooms, which are indicated by squares, are dead-end spaces, since they are connected to the adjacent classrooms. The classrooms are also deeply located in the plan with respect to the entrance. Using the ISOVIST software, the occlusivity of the school was analyzed. The central hall and the entrance corridor are highly occluded due to the position of columns. Classrooms are low occlusivity, however, the buffer spaces between classrooms and the staircases are highly occluded. This increases the chance of interacting with new people.
The above case studies help us to collate common conclusions across a set of factors that greatly influence the pedagogy and the spatial layouts of a school, like gathering spaces or courtyards. which across different schools mostly act as well-integrated connecting spaces, spaces for collective and communal gatherings, sports activities, and activity-based learning. There are a few internal variations among the qualities of these open spaces, like having them as classrooms, attached backyard spaces in case of the Montessori school in Delft, or completely detached from the school interiors as in case of Apollo School in Amsterdam, or in case of St. Xavier's Ahmedabad where the courtyard serves as a primary connector between a cluster of 3 classrooms, a layout which has been repeated in the entire plan. The corridors in most schools are highly integrated spaces, connecting the different classrooms or like transitory spaces between the school exterior and the interior, making them places of informal as well as formal interactions. While in most cases the corridor serves as a primary means of circulation, schools such as Hunstanton School in UK and the Open Air School in Amsterdam do not have any corridors, and the access to the space is provided through lobbies and individual staircases, which is a conscious design choice made by the architect to avoid distractions in case of the formal school. The corridors also connect the services to the classrooms across the schools. While in some schools every classroom has its own washroom, other schools' washrooms are shared by students of different grades, forming important places of informal interaction. The inward-outward looking nature of a school to an extent influences the visitor-inhabitant relationship that the school tries to achieve. Most schools have boundaries restricting the accessibility of the visitors, where the inward-looking nature of the school allows most activities to take place without outside interference. But in certain schools like the Montessori School and the Evelyn Lois School, these restrictions are more diluted, at the same time controlled when it comes to direct accessibility to classrooms so as to ensure that the classrooms continue to remain distraction-free.
Classrooms in most schools form clusters or groups based on the age and grade. The cluster is either provided with a common space between different classrooms, or the classrooms are linked together through direct connections. The clustering and grouping demarcates the extent of interactions that the students have with their peers from a higher or lower grade. The individual classrooms in themselves are also a cluster of functions which are standardized across the school for a uniform experience. The topological type of classrooms also promotes a different type of pedagogy. Schools with a greater correspondence relationship between student and teacher have classrooms as dead-end spaces, promoting a higher level of autonomy over the class due to a strengthened hierarchy. While the schools with greater non-correspondence model have classrooms as part of loops, giving students a greater freedom to choose their own method of learning while still being supervised by the teacher. In this case, the teachers usually do not have a dedicated staff room, in contrast to the schools with a stronger hierarchy. Principal-to-student relations in most schools are seen to be correspondent, with an exception in St. Xavier's Primary School, Ahmedabad, where the hierarchy is broken by placing it right in the center of the building and keeping a corridor that runs through the principal's office as a shortcut for noisy students, thereby increasing the interaction between the principal and the pupil in a non-corresponding, more informal manner. Based on the above studies, we tried translating our understandings and observations in the development of our own designs, which we will discuss further.